complex pedantic theorem.
You can get it. All right. All right.
Welcome to the split infinitive world of English Grammar Part 2. I'm Galila Azaris. We English speakers and writers use grammar every day of our lives. We just might not know exactly how we're using it. That's where the Standard Deviants can help. We'll help you learn why we use words in certain ways when we want to communicate effectively. That's the whole point of grammar, making grammar easier for you to understand. Well, that's our whole point.
In Part 1, we introduced the concept of grammar, covered all the parts of speech, and also discussed how to construct simple and complex sentences.
In this part, we'll concentrate on grammatical things that can go wrong in sentences. We'll cover subject-verb agreement, the proper use of articles, and errors to stay away from, like sentence fragments, run-on sentences, tense shifts, and vague pronoun references.
We know that English grammar can trip you up sometimes. The Standard Deviants have scoured the nation for all the basic grammar information you need to know, and then hired some awesome English teachers to help us out. You can count on us to simplify this grammar stuff and make it easier to learn, easier to remember, and pretty enjoyable to watch. Believe it, it's our job.
Remember, this is a videotape. You can pause the tape, stop the tape, rewind the tape, or even destroy the tape at any time during your viewing.
Just in case you're a little fuzzy about the basic concepts of grammar, let's have a quick review.
Grammar is how the parts of the language, basically the words and punctuation, fit together to make sentences. We use grammar to communicate effectively with our friends, coworkers, and teachers. The grammar we most often use in formal written communication is SEAE, Standard Edited American English.
We place words into different groups called the parts of speech. The different parts of speech are nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections.
From there, we put these parts of speech into action by constructing sentences. Knowing how to construct these sentences correctly will improve your writing immensely.
But remember, as we mentioned in Part 1, writing is a process, so don't make yourself crazy fretting about grammar when you're first writing your ideas down. Deal with it when you're editing your work. If you need some help on the whole writing process, Dealey, check out The Wrinkle-Free World of English Composition. It'll help you get your thoughts down on paper.
Now that you're up to speed, let's learn a little bit more about that versatile language we speak, English.
Part 1. Stretching exercises. The flexibility of the English language.
Section A. Things change.
The English language is a living, breathing organism, and like any living thing, to survive, it must adapt to its environment.
So to stay alive and vibrant in everyday usage, the language must change. And change in language means change in grammar.
And this means that some things that were once strict grammar rules are now just, well, shall we say, grammar suggestions. What was unacceptable yesterday may be fairly kosher today.
So rules like the use of contractions, split infinitives, and the ending of sentences with prepositions are not as forbidden as they once were.
The same premise holds true for the future. What we call errors today may become perfectly acceptable usage in the generations to come.
But we do need to know what's acceptable these days and what's not. That's where syntax comes in.
Syntax is basically the grammar of sentences. So when we write sentences, we make sure we follow the rules that say how they should be written.
When we do, then we're using proper syntax. If your writing is full of improper syntax, then you could run into trouble in class, on your papers, or at your job, or on your resume.
So you can be creative when speaking and writing, but if you go too far and totally snap the rules of grammar in two, nobody will understand you.
Patch our train Lee, he all along plopped, green, green, groovy.
So, to communicate properly, remember that even as our language changes and grows, proper syntax is mucho important.
Section B, different strokes for different folks. Words can work as different parts of speech.
One way a language grows is by taking a word that functions as one part of speech and then using it as another part of speech. So a word is a word is a word, but the way a word is used grammatically can change. Let's see exactly what the parts of speech are so we know how a word can fit into more than one of them.
A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. Abraham Lincoln, Illinois, paper, and justice are all nouns.
A pronoun is a little word that takes the place of nouns in sentences. I, you, he, she, it, we, and they are all pronouns.
An adjective is a word that describes or modifies a noun. Big, funny, and colorful are all adjectives.
A verb is the action of a sentence. To run, to teach, to eat, and to be are all verbs.
An adverb is a word that can describe a verb, an adjective, and even other adverbs. An adverb often answers the questions how often, when, or to what extent.
A preposition is a word that shows a time or space relationship between other words. In, out, over, under, around, before, and after are all prepositions.
A conjunction is a word that provides a transition between parts of sentences. They sort of hook things together. And, but, or, and therefore are all conjunctions.
An interjection is a word or short phrase that expresses emotion or surprise. Wow! Hey! Zoinks! Man alive! Those are all interjections.
Okay, those are the parts of speech. Adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections.
Now, a word commonly used as a verb can become a noun. One used as a noun can become a verb. A noun can also become an adjective can become an adverb. So with some ambition, hard work, and a little bit of luck, a gutsy word can slip into several different parts of speech.
Take, for instance, the word place. An innocent word at first glance, harmless even. But whoa-ho-ho, just listen to this. First, let's look at place as a noun. Take the sentence, this place serves the best pheasant. This place is the subject of the sentence because it performs the action. The action is to serve, and this place serves the best pheasant.
Now, we can also use the word place as a noun in another way, this time as an object. In the sentence, when I want good pheasant, I come to this place. Place is working as an object of the preposition. It works like this. The preposition is to, and the entire prepositional phrase is to this place. So place is acting as an object of the preposition.
Okay, let's try place as a verb. We can say, Harold, please place the pheasant on my plate. Notice how place now describes an action, so we have a verb.
Hold on to your hats. We're about to make another change. Here's place as an adjective. Harold drew a lovely pheasant on my place card. See, place is now modifying card. Card is a noun, so we can call place an adjective. It's not just any card, it's a place card.
Let's look at a few more examples how a word can change from one part of speech to another, starting with nouns changing to verbs.
Nouns as verbs.
Take the word water. It started out as a noun, good old H2O. We can use it in a sentence. Let's say, she likes to drink lots of water.
Very good. In this sentence, water is a noun.
But what if we want to use it as a verb? We can, and nobody can stop us. We can say, she waters the plant. Here, she is a pronoun used as a subject, and our versatile verb is water.
We can even get a little creative. How about the word elbow? We can use it as a noun, as in, I have a boo-boo on my elbow. Aww. Next, we can say, she elbows me out of the way. Aww. But look, we've used elbow as a verb.
Okay, let's try to use a word as two different parts of speech in one sentence. This could be a doozy. How about Chris notes the time, then writes his mother a note? You see that? Notes is a verb first because it's the action Chris is performing. Then down at the end, note is a noun. It's a thing. It's what Chris wrote.
Now, let's turn the tables a bit and try to use some verbs as nouns.
Verbs as nouns.
When we use verbs as nouns, we're taking actions and transforming them into things. Here's our first example.
We can use the verb to look in a sentence. Sarah looks at the beautiful painting. Pretty straightforward. Sarah looks, that's our noun-verb combination. Now let's try using look as a noun. Sarah gives Fritz a dirty look. Our noun-verb combo is now Sarah gives, and look down here is a noun because it fits the definition of a noun, which is a person, place, thing, or concept. A dirty look is definitely a thing.
This is kind of fun. What can we do with the word fit? If we start out using it as a verb, we can construct a sentence like, the couch will fit over there. So far, so good. Let's try it out as a noun this time, such as, the jacket is not a good fit. Now our word that was used as a verb is being used as a noun. Just for fun, we can even change it into a noun with a different meaning, as in the sentence, you don't need to throw a fit about it. Just to be extra versatile, we can even try fit as an adjective, as in the sentence, this is a meal fit for a king. Remember, an adjective modifies a noun, so the adjective fit is modifying the noun meal. It's a fit meal, fit for a king, no less.
So, don't get caught up in labeling words as only one part of speech. What's important is how a word is used.
The English language is constantly changing, growing, and evolving. To communicate effectively, be sure to use proper syntax, which is the grammar of sentences.
The English language is very flexible and elastic. A word that is used as a noun in one sentence may be used as a verb in the next sentence. So any particular word may run the gamut of the different parts of speech, be it noun, verb, adjective, or even interjection. Now let's move on to another important element of SEAE grammar, agreement.
Part 2. Can't we all just get along? Proper agreement in English grammar.
In grammar, proper agreement just means that things hook up correctly in a sentence.
Failing to make sure the words in your sentences hook up is just like dressing in both plaids and stripes. And you wouldn't do that unless you were some kind of weirdo.
The agreements we're concerned about are subject-verb agreement, noun-pronoun agreement, and a special case of adjective-noun agreement, the proper use of articles. We'll look at subject-verb agreement first.
Section A, subject-verb agreement.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this section, we need a little refresher course on how subjects and verbs are supposed to work together. Basically, they must agree. They must agree.
In a sentence, the subject is the noun that performs the action, whatever the action may be, and the verb, that's the action, the zing of the sentence. When these two come together, they should have the proper form. What's the proper form, you ask? Well, Sparky, it depends on what the subject of the sentence is. Remember, the subject determines the form of the verb we need to use.
Let's look at some of the different kinds of subjects there can be. For instance, the personal pronouns. The personal pronouns are great because by discussing them, we can discuss all the possible verb forms there are.
We can have the singular subjects I, you, he, she, and it. The plural subjects are we and they.
So as you can see, we can have either singular or plural subjects in the sentences we write.
The grammar experts call this concept a subject's number. If we use either I, you, he, she, or it, well then, our subject's number is singular. If we use either we or they, then our number is plural.
Now, it's not like all these nouns are on some team together and they all need different numbers like 88, 12, or 26. Remember, a noun's number is either singular or plural.
That sounds like a good rule. Let's call it a grammar guide.
The grammar guide, then, is that a subject's number is either singular or plural. That's it.
The noun that we care about in a sentence is the subject. This is the important one. It's the noun that performs the action. And the subject is the noun that gets hooked up with the verb. Our little verby must fit in nicely with the subject. And that, in a nutshell, is agreement.
And our grammar guide for nouns and verbs is: the subject and the verb in a sentence must agree in terms of number. A singular subject takes a singular verb. A plural subject takes a plural verb.
This is how it should work in your sentences. When you use a singular subject, make sure you have a singular verb. And when you use a plural subject, make sure you have a plural verb. Okay, that's the way subjects and verbs should agree. But sometimes during the frantic pell-mell process of writing your ideas down, your sentences may fall prey to subject-verb disagreement.
Let's take as our subject Tommy and Belinda. Since there's two people, this is a plural subject. And let's take as our verb to dance.
We conjugate to dance like this. I dance, you dance, he, she, and it dances. We dance and they dance. Now, let's put our noun and verb together and see what's up.
Tommy and Belinda and dance. Tommy and Belinda are our subjects, so that means we have a plural subject. In this case, it's the same as saying they dance. So the subject is the third person plural, and the third person plural form of to dance is simply dance. Great!
But what if we wrote Tommy and Belinda dances? Well, that's not right. We have a plural simple subject, Tommy and Belinda, with the third person singular form of the verb, dances. The nouns and the verb disagree. As we just saw, the correct way to write this is Tommy and Belinda dance. Watch those kids cut the rug.
Let's change our subject now. What happens if we just have Tommy as our subject?
Okay, now we have Tommy dances. Whoa, our verb form is now dances. Why the change? Well, Tommy is our subject, so we just use the third person singular form of the verb, dances.
So it would be improper to say Tommy dance. That's not right either. Tommy is the third person singular, and we must use the proper verb form with it, dances.
Although in these sentences the disagreement seems pretty obvious, there are other sneakier sentences that can mess things up. Let's take a look at some.
Sometimes you'll find a sentence where the simple subject contains an appositive phrase.
Remember that an appositive is a descriptive phrase that either restates the simple subject of a sentence or adds new information about it.
Like in the sentence, Dr. Frankenstein, the famous scientist, went down to the graveyard. The famous scientist is an appositive because it gives us more information about Dr. Frankenstein.
Using an appositive is a great way to elaborate on the simple subject. Things can get sticky, though, when the simple subject is singular and the appositive is plural, or vice versa, when the simple subject is plural and the appositive is singular. Here, we'll show you what we mean.
Consider the sentence, the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, are destroying my eggplant. Before we go into how this sentence doesn't quite work, let's take it apart and figure out exactly what we're dealing with here.
The complete subject of our sentence is the chunk that performs the verb, are destroying, which in this case is the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests. Now comes the tricky part, identifying the noun that is a simple subject. Our candidates are herd and anteaters and wildebeests.
Notice how mostly anteaters and wildebeests is just a way for us to elaborate on herd. That would make herd the simple subject and mostly anteaters and wildebeests an appositive phrase, which gives us more information about the herd. But what we're really talking about is the herd.
So now that we know the simple subject is herd, which is singular, maybe we should take issue with our verb, are destroying. The herd are destroying. Does that sound right?
I don't think so.
Yes, I think we've got a little disagreement with the subject and the verb.
Our actual simple subject is heard, but we were distracted by the appositive, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, which is plural. That's probably because it's easier to visualize and it's closer to the verb, but we need to stay focused on our simple subject heard and choose the form of the verb that agrees with it. One great way to stay focused once you have identified the simple subject is to remove the appositive. Then take the simple subject and hook it up with the correct form of the verb you're using.
Okay, if we remove our appositive, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, we just have heard. Heard is a collective noun. A collective noun is when we use just one word, like family, to describe a bunch of different nouns, like mom, dad, sister, and brother.
By rule, collective nouns are singular, so our collective noun, heard, is singular. Let's connect our subject, heard, and our verb, to be. Since we know the verb should agree in number with the subject, we use the third-person singular form of the verb. We say, the stampeding herd is destroying my eggplant crop. Now we just need to put back in what we had removed, mostly anteaters and wildebeests. So our complete, correct sentence is, the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, is destroying my eggplant crop.
Now that isn't to say we can't be crafty and switch our sentence around a bit. We can make the subject the appositive and the appositive the subject.
Here's our new sentence. The anteaters and wildebeests, now a stampeding herd, are destroying my eggplant crop. Now our subject is the plural anteaters and wildebeests, and our appositive is the singular herd. Notice how we had to change the verb is to its plural form are to accommodate the new plural subject, the anteaters and wildebeests. Tricky, tricky.
As you can see, having an appositive that is different in number from the simple subject can cast all your plans for harmonious subject-verb agreement asunder.
For the sentence we just had, the anteaters and wildebeests, now a stampeding herd, are destroying my eggplant crop. We could have just ignored what was inside the commas, now a stampeding herd. That way we would have been just fine. So to repeat, to hook up the noun with the proper verb, sometimes you can ignore what's inside the commas.
Another thing to watch out for is when the verb and subject of your sentence are separated by a long intervening phrase or clause. Check out the following sentence.
The package, which includes 15 balls, 12 yo-yos, and 7 jacks, is almost ready to send.
Let's break our sentence down. What we have here is a dependent clause, which includes 15 balls, 12 yo-yos, and 7 jacks, injected into the middle of our independent clause. The package is almost ready to send.
Remember that an independent clause is one that can stand alone, while a dependent clause needs to lean on an independent clause for support.
Our subject here is package, a singular, so we use the singular form of the verb is. We have to resist the temptation to use a plural form of the verb here, which we might want to do since we're dealing with so many different toys, but you have to remember to keep your eyes on the subject, no matter how far away it is from the verb.
Let's make it a grammar guide. To ensure proper subject-verb agreement, keep your eyes on the subject, no matter how far away it is from the verb.
Okay, we know we have to look at the simple subject to decide on the form of the verb. But what if the subject is both plural and singular? Before the room begins to spin, let's show you what we're talking about. Look at this sentence.
The leopard and the crocodile enjoy tasty tourists. Here we have a plural subject, since it includes both a leopard and a crocodile, so we use a plural form of the verb, enjoy. Not so bad.
Now suppose our sentence is, the leopard or the crocodile enjoys tasty tourists. Simply by changing our conjunction and into or, we have changed the number of our subject to singular, since either the leopard or the crocodile will enjoy the tasty tourists, but not both. That's why we need to use the verb enjoys, a singular.
Now let's suppose our subject becomes the leopard or the crocodiles. Here we have two simple subjects, but one, leopard, is singular and the other, crocodiles, is plural. So what form of the verb do we use? Singular or plural? It just so happens we have a rule to guide us when a problem like this comes up.
Whenever your sentence has two simple subjects that differ in number connected by the conjunction or, Use the form of the verb that agrees with the simple subject closest to it. We can use a 3-step process to help us out.
Step 1. Find the verb. Step 2. Find the closest simple subject. Step 3. Use the form of the verb that agrees with this simple subject.
So our sentence could read, the leopard or the crocodiles enjoy tasty tourists. Here, since the plural crocodiles is closer to the verb, we use the third-person plural form of the verb to enjoy, which is enjoy.
Now, if we switch things around and change the order of the subjects, well, we have to switch the verb to match. We could also say, the crocodiles or the leopard enjoys tasty tourists. Now that the singular leopard is closer to the verb, we should change the verb to its singular form, enjoys.
So, that's how you avoid the trap of subject-verb disagreement. First, remember to focus on the subject and not be distracted by all those other pesky nouns and appositives that can throw you off. Next, determine whether it is a singular or plural. And finally, use the form of the verb that agrees with that number.
If your subject contains two elements that have different numbers and it's unclear which one to choose, go with the one closest to the verb. Remember, it is only safe to do this when the nouns are connected by the conjunction or, and the noun you decide to go with is one of the simple subjects of the sentence. This is because the verb has to agree with the subject, not just any old noun you find.
Section B. Nouns and articles. Proper agreement.
Articles are those tiny little words we tend to forget about. You know, a, an, and the. These guys may seem pretty harmless, but if you use them incorrectly, they can get you into hot water.
We stick a, an, and the in front of nouns like when we say, I'll take a shower, I'd really like an apple, or please take me to the train station. Pretty easy, but many times it's not so easy. There are rules for using articles correctly in SEAE, but many situations call for idiom, not cut-and-dried rules.
Idiom is the grammar equivalent of tradition. It's the way we say certain things, just because that's the way we do it. A couple of general rules do exist to cover articles, though.
First, a and an are called indefinite articles. We use an indefinite article before an unspecified noun.
Say I want to say something about a car. I just don't know which car I'm talking about.
So I might write, I want a car. Here we've used the indefinite article a.
What if we want to talk about an airplane, but we're not discussing any particular airplane?
In this case, we can write, I want an airplane. Here we've used the indefinite article an.
The question is, when do we use a and when do we use an?
We use Big Mr. A before all the nouns that begin with a consonant. Consonants are those run-of-the-mill letters like B, C, D, F, all those, and so on. But we use an and before nouns that begin with a vowel. Vowels are those special letters like A, E, I, O, and U.
So when we write, I want a car, we use the indefinite article a, because car starts with a C, which is a consonant.
But if we write, I want an airplane, we use the indefinite article an. This is because airplane starts with an A, which is a vowel. So our grammar guide is, use a before all nouns that start with a consonant. Use an for nouns that begin with a vowel.
Let's not forget about our other article, the. The is known as the definite article, and we use it when we know exactly what noun we're writing about. So we can write, the ball is red, so we know exactly what ball we mean, the red one.
Or we can write, here is the mailman, or the house is for sale.
So, the way to use the definite article the is to stick it in front of the nouns we know definitely. Get it? The definite article?
Nouns are either singular or plural. Singular means there's just one, and plural means there's more than one. If you use a singular noun as your subject, be sure to use a singular verb. If you use a plural noun as your subject, be sure to use a plural verb. This is called proper subject-verb agreement.
To use proper subject-verb agreement, stay focused on the subject of your sentence. Don't let an appositive or an intervening clause confuse you.
Articles are the words a, an, and the. A and an are indefinite articles. Use an indefinite article when you're not referring to a specific noun. A goes in front of nouns that begin with a consonant, and an goes before nouns that begin with a vowel.
The is known as the definite article. Use the when you know exactly what noun you're referring to.
Part 3, sentence problems.
So there you are, minding your own business, writing great sentences. But there are things out there, lurking, waiting to trip you up. They are the dreaded sentence problems. They come in 3 horrifying varieties: sentence fragments, comma splices, and run-on sentences. Let's start with sentence fragments, if you dare.
Section A, sentence fragments.
Ah yes, our old friends sentence fragments. Remember them? Oh well, then maybe we should review.
A sentence fragment is when you try to pass off a phrase that can't stand alone as a sentence. This can happen in 3 ways. 1, it might be because the phrase doesn't have a noun. 2, it may be because the phrase doesn't have a verb. Or 3, your phrase may be a dependent clause that's pretending to be an independent clause.
Whichever one of these it is, you've got a sentence fragment on your hands. Now usually this happens when we stick a period where a comma should go. Let's take a look at one of these suckers.
I adore macrame, a lost and treasured art. Do you see it? The first sentence is fine, but the second one, let's take a closer look. Aha! Here's a lost and treasured art is an A positive for macrame. We know that a phrase cannot stand on its own as a sentence, so it looks like we have a dreaded sentence fragment.
The best way to fix a fragment is to hook it back on to the independent clause it needs to survive. And a great way to do this is with a comma. So, to fix this sentence fragment, we could write, I adore macrame, comma, a lost and treasured art.
One of the reasons it can be hard to resist the temptation of writing a sentence fragment is its frequent use in advertising.
Cool, crisp, refreshing. English grammar.
These are called emphatic fragments, and although they can be extremely effective in advertising, they aren't generally accepted in either business or school writing.
So that's what happens when you put a period where you meant to put that comma. But what happens when you put a comma where you meant to put a period? Well, those are comma splices.
Section B, comma splicing.
Okay, see, we fall here into the trap of the old comma splice when we stick 2 perfectly good, complete sentences together with a measly little comma. It's not pretty. Take a look.
I called the witch doctor. He told me what to do. It's so tempting to link these 2 clauses together with a comma because they are so closely related and we don't want to mess up the flow.
But check this out. Both of these clauses, I called the witch doctor and he told me what to do, are independent clauses. They can both stand on their own as sentences, so we can't join them with a comma. Let's go over that again.
Grammar guide. 2 independent clauses cannot be joined by a comma.
However, you do have several options in fixing this sentence fragment.
The easiest way to fix the problem is just to make them 2 separate sentences. I called the witch doctor, period. He told me what to do.
Not as exciting though, is it? It just doesn't have that flow we all love to have in our writing. So to keep that flow, let's reach into our bag of tricks. We can combine these independent clauses to form a compound sentence.
Remember, to form a compound sentence, you simply hook the 2 independent clauses together with either a conjunction, a colon, a semicolon, or a dash. Let's try using a conjunction.
I called the witch doctor and he told me what to do. Wonderful! And all we had to do was add the conjunction and.
Now let's try it with one of our forms of punctuation. Since these two clauses are closely related, we probably want to go with a semicolon here. Let's try it on for size. I called the witch doctor, semicolon. He told me what to do. In this case, the semicolon is sort of like saying and. Looks like a winner to me.
There is one extra special time when you can get away with a comma splice. Say you need to fuse together 3 or more very short sentences. Take the following.
I egg your house, you run over my bike, you get mad, I get mad, suddenly we're both screaming.
Each of these short clauses can stand alone as a sentence, but because they're so short, we can get away with joining them with commas. So check your sentences to be certain you haven't connected 2 or more independent clauses together with a comma. Be vigilant and you will avoid the dreaded comma splice.
Section C, run-on sentences.
You know how when some people talk, they just go on and on and on and on? Well, sometimes the sentences we write just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. We call these guys run-on sentences.
A run-on sentence is an attempt to try to jam together 2 sentences into one without using punctuation between them. You know, it's kind of like a comma splice, with no comma.
While run-on sentences do tend to be long, the length of a sentence does not have anything to do with whether or not it is a run-on. A run-on is a problem with the structure of a sentence, not its length. Consider the beginning of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
A long sentence, yes, but its structure is fine. So it's not a run-on sentence, just long.
Here's what a run-on looks like. I usually eat too many candy corns on Halloween and get a stomach ache. How about you? Obviously, we need to break this up into 2 separate sentences. I usually eat too many candy corns on Halloween and get a stomach ache. How about you?
We might sometimes write a run-on sentence because we're afraid to separate 2 closely related thoughts. They usually happen during our first draft of writing something. If we take the time to read over our work, we can catch most run-ons. Just remember that a sentence has a subject and a predicate. Then if you find a sentence with lots of subjects and predicates, break the sentence up.
A sentence fragment is a phrase that can't stand alone as a sentence. This may be because it doesn't contain a noun or because it doesn't contain a verb. Or it could be a dependent clause attempting to masquerade as an independent clause.
A comma splice is when 2 complete sentences are joined by just a comma. There are 2 remedies for a comma splice. You can separate them into 2 freestanding sentences, or you can join them by a conjunction, a colon, a semicolon, or a dash.
A run-on sentence actually contains 2 sentences which have no punctuation between them. Break these guys up into different sentences, or insert the correct punctuation mark between them.
Part 4. Finding Clarity.
We all want our writing to be clean, clear, and lucid. Well, it's not too hard if you avoid the grammatical traps of tense shifts, vague pronoun reference, and faulty parallels. We'll go over each, starting with tense shifts.
Section A, tense shifts.
We covered verb tenses quite a bit in the split infinitive world of English grammar part 1. Basically, a verb can take different forms depending on what tense it's in.
A tense shift, then, is when we improperly switch the tenses of the verbs midway through our sentence.
Tense shifts usually happen when we're constructing compound or complex sentences. Let's look at an example.
The show opened with a big musical number that involves fireworks. This sentence begins in the past tense with the verb form opened, but then halfway through switches to the present tense with the verb form involves. This just isn't consistent and can really confuse the reader.
This sentence can be fixed easily by making sure all the verbs are in the same tense. This ties into that whole consistency thing. With regards to tense shift, most of the time we want to choose a tense and stick with it throughout the sentence.
The verbs in our sentence are opened and involved. We can either put them both in the present tense or put them both in the past tense. Let's try it with the present tense first. The show opens with a big musical number that involves fireworks.
Or we can have both of our verbs in the past tense, which gives us the show opened with a big musical number that involved fireworks. This is fine because both of the verbs in the sentence are in the past tense, not just one.
Again, this is the kind of mistake that usually is just the result of writing too fast and losing track of which tense you're using. You can easily catch correct tense shifts if you pay attention to the consistency of the verbs in each sentence.
Section B, vague pronoun reference.
So Sandy's sitting next to Susan, and I said that I think that she should move over and sit next to her, but she says she doesn't want to sit next to her.
Who? She?
No, her. Pronouns take the place of nouns, that we know. But when we use a pronoun, it should be very clear what noun we're referring to.
Suppose we say the Yanks are way ahead of the Sox, who are playing great ball too. They've had a great season. Whoa! See that they? Who is it referring to, the Yanks or the Sox? You see, it's not really clear. It could be the Yanks because they're way ahead, or it could be the Sox because they're playing great ball. We've got to make a change. The best way to fix this is simply to get rid of the pronoun. So let's take that pesky they out of there. Now we have to decide who's having a great season. Let's say it's the Sox. So we keep our first sentence the same, and in the second sentence, take out the pronoun they and insert the Sox. So we have the Yanks are way ahead of the Sox, who are playing great ball too. The Sox have had a great season. Now, that's a lot clearer, isn't it?
So be careful when you use pronouns. Straight up, if it's not clear who or what you're referring to, then don't use the pronoun. Check out this problem sentence.
Jimmy told Joe to give back the boxing glove before he hit him with it. Wow, that's pretty vague. Who's hitting who? We might guess Jimmy will hit Joe with the boxing glove, but we can't be 100% sure.
Let's clear things up and make Jimmy the one who'll hit Joe with the glove. Jimmy told Joe to give back the boxing glove before Jimmy hit him with it. Sounds pretty good. The sentence, not the possible altercation.
So be extra careful when you've got a pronoun that can refer to more than one noun in your sentence. There's one more vague pronoun reference trap that we can fall into. When we try to capture a really complex idea with a pronoun like this or which, we could really make things confusing. Suppose I say,
Someone is spreading vicious rumors. They say that Scooter is going around throwing coconut cream pies in his friends' faces. This is not to be tolerated. What in the world is this referring to? Does it refer to the vicious rumors, or does it refer to Scooter throwing the pies? Do you see how easy it is to confuse a reader just by using the tiny pronoun this?
The best way to fix this vague pronoun reference is probably to just do away with the pronoun this altogether. Our sentence may not be as short and sweet, but it will make sense. So we can say,
Someone is spreading vicious rumors. They say that Scooter is going around throwing coconut cream pies in his friends' faces. Such scandalous gossip is not to be tolerated. There. No vague pronoun reference, no confused readers, and no funny aftertaste.
Now let's look at that third trap that can keep us from finding clarity, faulty parallels.
Section C, faulty parallels.
at first, faulty parallels sound like something that will keep you from succeeding in Olympic gymnastics, or something your car mechanic would say to explain why the simple repair you expected will suddenly cost in the thousands. But first things first, let's talk about parallels, then we'll go into what can make them faulty.
Parallels are elements in a sentence that perform the same function and which should be formed the same way. Structuring parallels correctly is a great way to show your readers you think logically and are a lean, mean writing machine. Here's an example of good parallelism.
As soon as I get home, I'm going to trim the hedges, wash the dishes, and fry the bacon. Each of the elements on this list is structured the same.
We have trim the hedges, wash the dishes, and fry the bacon. Well, they're all verb phrases.
Now that was proper parallelism. Say that 5 times fast. Let's purposely mix things up.
As soon as I get home, I'm going to trim the hedges, I will wash the dishes, and the bacon needs to be fried as well. Although this sentence is grammatically correct, it lacks the order and clarity of our first sentence. Now, with these different constructions, the rhythm is very choppy.
Here's another case of faulty parallelism. Representatives from the Onion Society, from the Tuber Appreciation Association, and Up With Root Vegetables attended the protest. Not all of these elements have been structured the same way. The first one, the Onion Society, heads off our list and comes complete with the preposition from. From this point, we can decide to go one of 2 ways.
First, we could carry the preposition from with each of the parallels on our list. This is what we did with our second parallel, from the Tuber Appreciation Association. Or a second route we could take is leaving the preposition where it is and letting it go for all 3 parallels, like we did with the third one, Up With Root Vegetables.
Are you beginning to see our problem? We carried the preposition with us for the second item on our list, but left it where it was for the third one, giving us a horrible case of dreaded faulty parallelism. We can fix this problem 2 different ways.
We could go the way of the tubers and carry the preposition all the way through, giving us representatives from the Onion Society, from the Tuber Appreciation Association, and from Up With Root Vegetables attended the protest.
Or we could just use the preposition from once and simply write representatives from the Onion Society, the Tuber Appreciation Association, and Up With Root Vegetables attended the protest.
Either way, we end up with a much better overall sentence, all because we paid attention to good parallelism.
There are 3 traps that keep us from finding clarity in our writing. They are tense shifts, vague pronoun references, and faulty parallels.
Tense shifts are when we improperly switch verb tenses during a sentence. Try to decide on one verb tense and stick with it.
Vague pronoun reference is when we use a pronoun in a sentence, but we aren't really clear about which noun we're referring to. Oftentimes, removing the pronoun and simply using the noun can alleviate the problem.
Parallels are elements in a sentence that perform the same function and should therefore be constructed in the same way. Faulty parallelism occurs when these elements are not constructed consistently.
Part 5, not your uncle's English grammar. Acceptable errors.
We've tried in our program to teach you about the mistakes almost any teacher or boss will catch. But there are a few things that are widely accepted in SEAE that aren't accepted by everyone. We'll give you a rundown of the so-called errors that these days only true sticklers object to.
So remember, things that are allowable in one type of writing, like a letter to your Aunt Murgatroyd, might not be acceptable in something more formal like an honors thesis.
Section A, use of contractions.
A contraction is a sort of shortcut we use in speech. It's like when we say I'm instead of I am, or he's instead of he is. While there is absolutely nothing wrong with contractions in terms of grammar, it does tend to make your writing style seem a little informal.
While we're on the subject of contractions, we're going to bring up a common mistake that's easy to make and definitely one of your teacher's top 10 pet peeves. Confusing contractions with possessive pronouns. Big no-no.
One of the biggest problems is with the words it's and its. If we go by what we normally think is right, it seems like it''s is a possessive pronoun.
That's because we might say, that is Peter's bicycle. Peter possesses the bicycle, so we slap an apostrophe-s on the end of Peter.
But things are a little bit different with its and it''s. The possessive it just takes an s on the end of it.
So we would say, the